Yeah, hopefully the rates will go down.
It'll be your best investment you'll make in life, or the homes you buy. I'll tell you, if you really struggling over your 5% when I financed my first house, it was at 15%.
That was the 80s, baby.
I know, that's what everybody tells me. Like, my generation used to like, oh, it's not 2%, I'm not buying this. But like, everybody I talk to that's, older than we are, they're like,
Yeah.
oh, back in the day, we had to pay like 12%.
But the price
at
of
15%.
the price of the house was way
Oh
lower. though.
yeah, it was.
The principal wasn't.
Yeah,
wasn't
we
that
built
much.
a house and everything for like $60,000 $1,000.
We could do that today. Like, we could, it's just crazy. The
Yeah.
amount of the inflation is just.
It's unreal. It's unreal.
Let's start the podcast talking about that.
Yeah,
I
I've
feel
been
like
recording
people.
for 2 minutes,
I feel like
so-
people think that we're not political enough on here.
Oh my gosh.
Let's just get a little bit more political. I'm just kidding. Hey, welcome to the sermon recap.
Are we on?
We might as well be. This is this is what happens when we don't get together often enough. This is the Reverend Dr. Mac Brunson. I'm Kirkwood Bullis. I'm a reverend. That's the Reverend Kirkwood Bullis, illustrious worship pastor, illustrative worship pastor. And it's Monday morning. It's the Monday after the week of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Yeah,
So we have to talk about that. We got to talk about the men's
I thought we were going to
breakfast,
talk
too.
about house prices and.
You would,
interest
sorry,
rates,
we were going to talk about
because-
interest. Yeah, we were going to. So our real estate. Well, that's in a separate feed. Our real estate
because,
podcast.
Jared back here
He's on the phone with his
he's
realtor
on a,
right
he's,
now.
He's going to make a contract. He's putting a contract on a house. They're going to drive-by shooting is what it's going to be.
I tell you, yeah, it's rough out there. We're talking about how real estate's prices are shifting and the interest rates are up and down. My generation is complaining about like 5 and 8% interest rates, but your generation is
My
what?
first house that I bought was 15% interest.
15% interest rate.
Under the
That-
great Jimmy Carter.
That's good. That's Jimmy Carter keeps coming up around here. God bless you, Brother James Carter.
Oh.
So that was a long time ago. I feel like that's borderline illegal. That's like a credit card interest rate now. You get your APR in the
Oh
mail.
man, those
You're like,
things get to 28%, 32%. That's unreal.
We pay ours off just every month. We never pay the interest, but it's
Smart
scary.
move.
It's scary. Like they sent me a thing this past week. We have an American Express card, and they were like, normally your rate is like 27%. I was like, wow. I'm glad we never do that. But but for the next year, it's only 10%, 9.99.
Go load her up.
That's what I said. I said to my wife, I was like, look, we can finally. She's like, no, you're out of your mind. But if we cheat the taxes, we'll be fine. That's what I told her, just because you've discipled me well, but she still didn't.
Yeah.
She still didn't listen. We'll get to the taxes thing later. But anyway, money changes. There's different. I don't even know what to say. Do you want to wrap that discussion up? You started all this.
He was talking about the interest rate he had to pay. I said, well, let me make you feel better. My first house cost me 15% interest.
So yeah.
But, the price of the house was way less than half of what he's about to pay
Yeah.
For a house.
Well, so congrats to Jared and
It all
Sarah.
works
You
out.
got the house.
Yeah.
Out there in Springville. Beautiful country out
Yeah.
there.
It's a 8,000 square foot house on about 10 acres of land.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like I said, it's beautiful. It's got the full-size football field he's installing out there.
The horse track, to run the horses
To go
on.
around. Yeah, well, that's how he's going to finance the house. He's going to have a betting operation on the horse races.
I'll have a little
Be going
derby
out there.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch horse racing? We always would watch the Triple Crown races growing up. Were you guys into that? You didn't care?
No.
I
Not
think
too
it
much. We didn't. We had horses available to us, so
Oh,
we
cool.
went riding and
Oh, neat.
all of that. So
Yeah.
I wasn't interested in
You weren't
watching a
You
bunch
didn't
of
want to watch
horses
it on
race
TV.
around
You
it.
could live it. Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
We lived it.
every time I would get on a horse.
We were out there with the Marlboro man.
That's right. Every time I'd get on a horse, my feet would touch the ground on either side. I'm like, I don't understand the appeal of this. So
I bet they did.
I just
I
don't.
bet they did.
But my mother-in-law, speaking of the Marlboro Man, my mother-in-law texted me. She's like, well, you need to go. I forget where she wanted us to go, because the Budweiser Clydesdales were coming through town.
Those are so pretty.
Oh, they're so beautiful. And I was like, wow, I mean, am I allowed to go see these? You know, I'm not going to buy the beer. And she
No,
said,
no. You can go look at a beautiful horse.
You can go look at the
That
horse.
horse
So,
doesn't know anything about what it's doing.
so we might go because those are huge.
They are huge. They're big old draft horses is what they used them to pull logs out the woods.
Yeah.
They'd cut down trees and they'd use them to pull those trees out.
That's about as big. I guess I don't know too much about. Do they live very long? Usually the bigger animals don't live as long. Right?
That I don't really know, but they are massive horses. They are impressive.
The guys that have figured out, I mean, because it's the same thing with dogs, like just how they figure out how to breed the different animals to do a particular job or look a particular way. It's just fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's interesting because those things were bred. You get to the horses that are over in Scotland. I think they bred them out of those horses because they use them to do the same thing, to pull those massive logs to where they could be turned into boards.
I saw a video on YouTube. I didn't watch it, but they were trying to experiment with how many horsepower is an actual horse.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about that? Like when they originally said, because even now we've got electric cars, and it's like, how many horsepower is this? It's like, well, how powerful is a horse? Have we lost sight of that?
Yeah.
Have we lost sight of that? Maybe I'll watch it and report back. I thought that stuff.
I did, and I remember this, and I've used it as an illustration. They can take one of those horses, and it can pull something like, 1,000 pounds, let's say.
Yeah.
It can pull 1,000 pounds. But when they team it up with another horse,
like 5,000.
It can pull like 3,000
Yeah,
pounds.
yeah.
And they talk, you're looking at that. What can you do as a team?
That's a great illustration.
Solomon says that in Ecclesiastes, 2 are better than 1.
Yes, there's a cord of 3
Yeah,
strands, not
yeah.
easily broken.
Yeah.
Such an important. I still remember. Did you ever do children's church at any of your churches
we
back
did.
in the day? We have the children's message, and then they go.
Yeah.
I remember so vividly going up for children's church, and they had it was a great object lesson because it must be like a core memory for me. They had the string, and then they said, okay, take this brick. It's just a normal red brick. Now drop it on the string, and of course the string breaks.
Yeah.
But then they get I think it was like 10 or 15 strings, and you drop the brick, and suddenly it holds it. And I was like, I've always thought that's exactly what he's talking about there.
Yeah.
Children's church, maybe we should bring it back.
Dr. Charles Ryrie, who was this last generation's probably one of the top 5, I would say, theologians in the world. You know how he started out? He started out doing children's church in the church where he was on staff. And because I asked him one time, I said, Dr. Ryrie, we were in Greece and he had done something. I had him do things at different places, and he would travel with me to Israel and then to Greece and Israel and Greece. And he could just synthesize scripture like, I thought, this is fascinating. Nobody's ever taught a class on this or anything. Man, I asked him, I said, he said, teaching children's church. He said, you have to learn how to speak on their level.
Yes.
Make it interesting, and you pull big things together, and you put them, And he said that's how he learned to do that.
Well, that's how you show you've learned something.
Yeah.
I can't remember whose quote it was where they had this new scientific principle, and they couldn't distill it down to where a freshman could understand it.
Yeah.
And they said, go back to the drawing board. And they were like, why? Well, because we don't understand it.
Yeah.
If it shows that we don't understand it because we can't simplify it.
Yeah.
I was talking
That's
to Rick,
true.
I was talking to Rick Burgess about that on Saturday before the men's breakfast, and he was laughing. He asked me some kind of obscure biblical question. I didn't know the answer to it. And he said that sometimes on the show or something, they'll have the Bible trivia face-off,
Right.
that kind of thing. And he said, we usually have the seminary trained, the degrees over here. But he says, who always mops the floor with them?
Who's that?
The old lady Sunday school teachers. Because it's just like you said with Dr. Ryder, they've been going through and synthesizing this information just
Yeah.
for forever and ever. And they know all the names, they know all the order of everything. And I said, that's absolutely right. Because, oh, you weren't in town for this, but when we had the volunteer banquet, we did like a Bible trivia Jeopardy thing. Did they
Yeah.
tell you about this? And Carol Topping destroyed me.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, now she knows her Bible now.
She killed me, man. She had, there were like 4 or 5 things where she was dead on. I'm like, I'm sorry, guys. You know, my team was looking at me like, you bum. I'm like, I'm sorry. I didn't remember where Jezreel was in 2 Kings.
Yeah.
I don't even know if he's there. I just made that up. We're reading through Judges right now around our supper table.
Oh boy. Well, that's good with a bunch of children.
Well, I tell you, the most interesting thing is how much I forget. I mean, I was just talking about, like, this is, I don't know how many times I've read Judges, but I keep looking over my wife. I'm like, do you remember this part? She's like, I didn't remember that part either.
Yeah.
But I keep referring back, because you preached that, was it 3 years ago?
I guess.
Maybe 4 years ago. Because we just had to go through Jephthah. You know, Jephthah's tragic vow, where he says he's going to sacrifice. And because I remembered what you said about why the text gives a good implication that he didn't actually sacrifice his daughter.
Yeah.
Now, do we know for absolute certain? Well, no, maybe not for certain, but there's a good chance that he didn't actually do it.
I don't think he did. God wouldn't be so totally opposed to human sacrifice and then in Jephthah's case go, we'll let
Yeah.
you slide.
I think you're
know.
right. Well, because it lists him as one of the faithful in Hebrews
Yeah,
12.
yeah.
I listened to that this morning. I forgot.
There's a
about
lot
it.
of indication that he gave her to serve at the temple.
Yes.
You know, there were the women that served at the gate of the temple.
Well, and I had to look that one up too.
Yeah.
You know.
So, well, just be careful when you get toward the end of the book.
With
I
Judges.
don't want you to have to explain a lot of this stuff.
Oh, when they draw and quarter the people and all that stuff. Yeah,
and
it's rough.
And it's, you know, you got Benjamin and all of his mess and everything.
That is really rough. Yeah.
Anyway,
I was talking when we were in Genesis. Of course, I mean, there's some wild stuff in Genesis. I think you even breezed through this a couple of weeks ago in the pulpit. But just like, you know, Noah's sin, and then you have the incest with Lot. And I remember when I was about to read that, I ended up talking to Barry about it. I was like, do I need to skip over this? And he like looked me dead in the face. He's like, no, read it. The kids need to hear that. I was like, Barry, hardcore. Okay. So we read it and we did our best to explain it. And I was like,
well, we'll talk about that in about 10 years. We'll talk about that. We'll come back in 10 years and talk to you about that.
Yesterday, the kids, well, my wife decided that they took me to see the new Inside Out movie.
Oh,
Did you ever
okay.
see the first one where the characters are in the brain, like, and it shows how our emotions are? And
No, I didn't know about
well,
that.
I'll skip to the end then, because it's all about what it's like, just internally in your emotions. A comedic view at your emotions as you go through puberty.
Yeah.
And so we sit down for supper, and I'm about to take a bite, and my daughter's like, Dad, what's puberty? And I'm like,
I know because we saw y'all at supper.
no, that's right, yeah.
At the end, and that was Nail walking down, and she was just smiling big as day, and I thought, I know that child. Is that Nail? And I thought, no, she's changing. I mean, as she's
so
growing,
big.
she's beginning to change her looks and everything. I thought, that's not Nail, but boy, she looks like her. And then I look up, and there's you.
Yeah, man, we had a gift card to the Olive Garden, so we were hanging out, and then I caught you and Miss Debbie. You were on your 8th or 9th breadstick, I think, when I passed by there.
Listen, I think I had two. I think.
Oh boy,
That's
you were
one too
good.
many.
You were good. Man, those things are so
Oh,
good.
they are good when they're hot. When they
Yes.
bring them out.
The kids, for some reason, the kids were more interested in eating the other things, and so I kept taking away their breadsticks. I think I had like 4 or 5 of them. They were so good.
It's hard to control yourself with. And you know, Red Lobster's closing up. They say, or at least it's filed bankruptcy. And I'm just hoping somebody gets that cheese biscuit recipe. And
Yeah. We got to get that into
Gosh,
stores.
those things are so
Figure that
good.
out, Red Lobster.
Yeah.
Y'all could dig your way out of bankruptcy. You don't even have to have a brick and mortar.
Yeah.
Just sell the. You know what they should do?
Go in next door to
Krispy Kreme.
Krispy Kreme.
That's exactly what
it.
they should do.
That's it. We've solved your financial problem.
That's it. Listen.
That's
just
what we're here for.
You know, listen. Pizza Hut and KFC, they're sharing the same building.
That's right.
You guys just figure that out.
Biscuits and donuts.
You know, if you're not feeling the sweet, you can go over here and get the savory.
I do them both at the same time.
Oh,
Wow.
wow.
The flavor. Ooh.
Jared, are you listening to this?
Okay.
Jared's mouth is
He's
watering.
running out to Krispy Kreme.
Man, this is a great idea. Wow. Let's just pray and go home.
Oh.
This has been such a good
You
time.
will not believe the people. I had, for example, I was at breakfast and I had a pastor's wife and their kids come up and she said, these children will not, and they used to live in New Mexico, they're now in Louisiana. She said, these children will not miss the sermon recap with you and Kirkwood on Monday mornings.
It's too much fun.
So-
here we are.
Cooksies, I'm throwing out to you right now.
Somebody else is going to think of that idea. Listen, you don't owe us a cent. Just give us a gift card when you open the Red Lobster. Just give us. We just want a lifetime supply.
Golly.
So yeah, did you want to say anything more? Because you saw people at the convention, I guess.
Yeah, I saw tons of
So
people.
you want to tell? You probably want to tell us like how it was just like a contentious,
No.
divisive, horrible experience, and the convention is utterly fractured and will never recover, just like I saw on Twitter, right?
Yeah, well, probably. But no, it was a
Just-
good convention. It was a lot lighter. In fact, I mentioned that to several people. I said, you know, Chris Johnson, who was at
Yeah,
all
he
the
was there with Lifeline,
he was there,
yeah.
and I said, Chris, have you noticed that it's a little lighter this year?
Yeah.
People are not as heavy. People are not as, and he said, yeah. He says, I've noticed that. And I asked several people that, and they all said that they felt the same way. You know, you can only take so much despair
Yeah.
for so long. And so you know, I mean, everything didn't go my way, but everything doesn't have to go my way.
Yeah.
There were a lot of good things that did take place.
Yeah, well, and so I called you on, I don't know, it must have been Thursday or something. Yeah. And because all I'd seen was all the negative press about it. And
Well,
just-
the newspaper, when they get in, for example, on the law amendment, which got 62, 63%,
yeah, it was in there somewhere.
somewhere right in there, in favor of the law amendment. It passed last year by 2/3. To amend the Constitution, you have to have 2/3 votes 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
Which is pretty smart to do that. It failed to get 2/3 vote, although it got
A majority.
a majority, a good majority, a strong majority. And, you know, there were men on both sides good, men that I respect, conservatives that I respect highly on the other side. Some saying, no, we don't need it. Others saying, yes, we've got to settle this thing. You know, I was caught in the middle. I didn't, you know, if it passes, great. If it doesn't, it's not going to change anything. And yet USA Today,
Yeah.
once that vote is taken, comes out and says, well, Southern Baptists are going to continue to allow women or some crazy that had nothing to
Yeah.
do with the fact of what the convention had done.
Right.
That's not what the convention. But they've got to put that spin on it because
Yeah.
that's how they sell a newspaper.
Well, it's also just continue. Like, we got to understand that if people don't want to have respect for the Bible, of course they're going to look for any way they can to defame Southern
Yeah,
Baptists
sure.
and hold to biblical inerrancy.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's
that's
true.
going to continue to happen. And you gave a special update in the pulpit, and that's part of your sermon, which is on YouTube, about the IVF controversy and how
Yeah.
Christians can be faithful in that.
Yeah.
I thought that was helpful.
Yeah.
Because I guess you'd gotten a lot of mail about that.
I
People wanna
had.
know.
I mean, even before the vote came up, we were getting a lot of text and
Yeah.
emails and, you know, what is this and what's going on and what have they done? And the paper has gotten all of that stuff messed up as well. And really, I think, had I been in the room when that came up, I would have tried to speak to that.
Yeah.
resolution because I think there was a much better way to say it
Oh, I see.
than the way it was stated. But I was not in the room because it was at the very end of Wednesday. It was at the very end of Wednesday and around lunchtime, and I was going back to the room to get Deb to come to the Southwestern luncheon, and then we were to leave that early, go flip our clothes, and catch a plane to come home. So
That's a lot.
I
That's a lot to do.
I didn't even get to hear that, but man, we started getting all kind of email. I turned around, J.D. Greer sat right there at me
Oh, wow.
on the plane, so I was asking J.D. about it, and I don't think J.D. was in there when it went down either, but I don't know. But we talked about it, and he explained a little bit of it to me, and of
Yeah,
course
I need to-
Debbie
I
was
need to
doing
read
her
through it.
homework all through that, but.
Yeah, I need to read through that. But I appreciate you addressing it. You guys can.
Yeah,
Pastor
you can
talked
sit
about
in
it
the
for about
sermon.
5 to 8
Yeah,
minutes or so.
Yeah.
Well, what else before we get into the message? Just a quick word on that men's breakfast on Saturday.
Oh, it was great.
It
It really was great.
The food was
The
great.
place was packed out. I was
That was-
stunned. I
that was
walked in and I
wild.
saw that room just packed. I had a difficult time finding a seat, honestly. People kept saying, no, don't sit here, don't sit here. Go on over there, go on over there. So I kept going until some people didn't know who I was, and I sat down with them.
There you go. Finally, just a face in the crowd. It was good though, and it was good hearing the testimonies from.
It really was.
And then, and then Rick had a strong message about the 40 lashes minus one.
Yeah,
2
yeah,
Corinthians
yeah.
15, I think it was, or might have been 12. But anyway,
It was a real good message.
it was a good day. So, and it was a happy Father's Day yesterday, and here we are back on Monday, ready to talk about the message. Your
Do we
sermon.
have any time left?
Well, we can
What
make
Oh, we
time.
do,
We can talk. We
sure,
can talk
yeah.
as long as we want to.
We can talk for the next hour.
Listen, I'm under no obligation to go to Jeff McGukin's meetings as long as I'm
Okay.
sitting next to the senior pastor.
Be angry and sin not.
Now you were doing some toe stepping yesterday, Pastor.
Yeah, these are tough verses. I mean, it's not like, oh gosh, I think I'd love to preach these so I can just rip everybody up and shred all the folks there. They are tough, but this is Paul, and it's the New Testament, and it's the next passage, and I'm going to pick back up with verse 29, Sunday.
Yeah, unwholesome words.
So we looked at 25, 26, 27, and 28, the three.
Yeah. So you had the anger
Yeah.
and the lying and the stealing.
The lying, the anger, and the stealing, yes.
And you had, it seemed like, I was trying to listen closely to both services, and it seemed like you focused more on anger in the second service. Like you gave that a little
Well,
bit
he
more
has a
time.
little bit more to say about that in a sense, in that he gives us three principles here about anger. But
Well, and I thought that was probably the most clear. I feel like that one was the one where it's like, yeah, I mean, don't be angry. There's a righteous anger and an unrighteous anger.
Mm-hmm.
I loved, and it bears repeating, that you cross-referenced verse 31 where
Yeah.
he says, let the anger be taken, let that be stripped away from you.
yeah,
It's always helpful when we see like scripture in context.
Yeah, yeah.
There's two different kinds of
yeah,
anger.
yeah. He says up here, be angry.
Right.
He says, okay, go ahead, be angry. And then down here he says, strip this away, put it away from you, strip it off, get it off. Well, he's obviously saying two different things. One, to be angry. One is to strip it off. This is an unrighteous, contentious, fleshly anger
Right.
here that is driven by pride, that is probably fueled by vengeance. I want my ounce of flesh, my pound of flesh, from this person that I'm angry at. But up here he says, be angry and do not sin. And I go on to show that there are so many places in the Old Testament. In fact, I'll give you one right now back in Psalm 7. The 7th Psalm.
Oh, is this where God is angry
Yeah,
every day?
verse 11,
Yeah.
God is a righteous judge and a God who has indignation or anger every day. He's angry every day. Well, what is he angry at? Well, Isaiah tells us in Isaiah 60, what is it? Isaiah 64,
Oh,
I
yeah,
think.
I wrote that
Yeah.
one down. I can pull that up.
Behold, you were angry, for we sinned. We continued in them a long time. That's Isaiah 64, the second part of verse 5. And then he asks the question, shall we be saved? You know, is there any salvation from your anger? And that's when he calls on the Lord to be merciful. God, be merciful. You've made us. We're your creation. We're the clay. You're the potter. Look at us.
That's such an
You know, that is such a, I can identify with Isaiah when he says, don't be angry beyond measure. Remember the iniquity. Behold, look now, all of us are your people. God, look at us.
Right.
We're your children. The way I look at my children, or used to look at my children, I look at my grandkids now. When you've got to discipline them and you just say, I'm not going to be as harsh as I can be.
Right.
You know.
Right. It's also a helpful window into seeing the character of God again, because like if you and me, by and large for the most part, if you're angry, you're angry.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you are. You're not all of your other attributes equally at the same time.
That's a good point. That's right.
We're such fickle, fallible people. We're either this or we're that, and whereas God, in his infinite nature, like he's all of these things all the time, infinitely wrathful, infinitely just, infinitely loving, infinitely compassionate, all this.
And he's not ruled by his emotions.
That's a better way of putting it. Yeah.
Oh gosh, what is the term for that?
Is it the immutability, like that he
No,
doesn't
it's,
change? This is where
Maybe it is. I'm thinking it was
the
something
Jeopardy
else.
theme comes in.
Yeah.
Well, we're thinking of the term.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
can't
that's a good point. God, it does have emotions in a sense.
Yes, but they don't rule him. They do not determine his actions.
Right? That's such an important part of our understanding of being image bearers, right? When we have emotions, it's still pointing to our Creator.
Right.
Who
Yeah.
feels, joy and compassion, and then also wrath and indignation and
Right.
these things. But like you said, we get carried away. You talked about how in anger, like you can get carried away into sin.
You can go so far. We just go so far. Your judgment is suspended in a moment like that. That's why you have things like, when they try them in course and you've got an invalid, somebody just explodes in anger.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a first-degree murder. It becomes a second-degree murder,
Yes.
a crime of passion,
Right,
something like that, because your emotions just got completely
It's not
out of.
premeditated.
It's not something that you would, as a person, would ordinarily do, but you've gotten carried away.
Got the insanity plea,
Yeah.
temporary insanity,
Yeah.
which is, there's some truth to
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So that's a good recap of what you talked about with anger. Let's see if we can talk some about the lying and the stealing as well.
And those kind of relate to
Yeah.
each other. I made the comment that my dad used to tell me. He said, son, if a man will lie to you, he'll steal from you as well.
No question about
And
that. There's
the
overlap.
lying and the stealing they kind of fit together.
Well, you talked about, you listed, because I don't think that we have a bunch of like pickpockets
No.
in Valleydale.
No.
Right? So we have
Just a few.
Just a few. Anyway, your wallet's right here. I wanted to give that back to you. The idea of looking at Scripture and understanding where your sin is still reflected here. Like we still need to understand how this applies to us. You mentioned plagiarism. Now that's a really interesting example because it's lying and stealing. It's lying to say, oh, this is my content. These are my ideas that I've created. Well, that's lying. But it's also stealing from this other person. A couple high-profile examples of that recently. Unfortunately, some pastors, they're leveled with the same accusations.
President at Harvard.
Oh yeah, that was a big one. That was sad.
There's several others that have come out here recently. Is it the president? Well, I don't want to say, of another major Ivy League school. And it seems like, I was never tempted in writing my dissertation to plagiarize somebody, but sometimes somebody will say it so well.
Sure.
Well, give them credit for it.
Just quote them, yeah.
Just quote them. Put a footnote down there.
Right.
The other thing is you try, and sometimes it's how can I say what they're saying, but say it in a different way? And that's the challenge,
Yeah.
you know. How
Right.
can I get this point across, but not in their words, but convey the same concept? And so it becomes a challenge when you're writing.
It's definitely a
papers.
challenge in preaching as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, because
Yeah,
preaching,
yeah.
preaching is not like it's not beholden to the same like academic rules as if you were writing a dissertation, right? And yet, in this day, when everything's being videoed and people want to like accuse you, well, you stole this. Well, I asked him about it, but it's just it kind of messes up the flow when you're like giving verbal footnotes every time.
The thing we say in teaching preaching is don't constantly keep mentioning. You don't have to constantly keep saying this is from so and so, and this is from so and so, and this is from so and so. You know, number one, do your own homework and try to put it in your words instead of you can start the sermon off and say I've relied heavily on my good brother in the music department today for this message or whatever, and then just go on and preach what you're preaching.
Right.
But when you do verbally, quote somebody word for word,
Sure.
it's good to give them credit. That's why I footnote my sermons in my manuscript.
I've seen that, yeah. I've seen it. Reminds me of that Babylon Bee article where a preacher on Saturday night with short sermon decides to pad out the rest with a bunch of G.K. Chesterton quotes. Just like fills it out. A couple more pages. Now we're ready to go. Okay, so that's kind of, I guess that's lying some, and you talked about lying on your taxes, which is also stealing from the government. You know, that's a really
Which we all would really like to do.
Oh my goodness, of course.
But we do still have to realize God's watching. So
well, and you did a great job of helping us understand how that feels ethically complex.
Yeah.
Because you have this organization, the government, which is saying, you have to give us this money. And also, you're not allowed to tell us not to give it to abortions and all these sorts of things. And that's really hard to swallow.
it is. It poses a real dilemma. At least it does for me when I stop and I start thinking about it. Then I just have to put it aside and say, listen, you know, I just really would hate for my wife to spend the rest of her life with me in prison because I didn't, I conscientiously object to all the stupid stuff that you're using money for.
It really is difficult.
It is.
But, you keep thinking about, I talked with a brother this week talking about like how we still have to pray for and respect those who are in office. Paul makes that clear, Romans 14.
Yeah.
So, it is figuring out the balance. And then I love that you said this, and I prayed this with my kids last night. Just, Lord, help us to understand when is the right time to stand up and say something.
Yeah, talking about anger, it kind of goes back to anger.
Yeah,
There
you're
is
right,
a
you're right.
right time to be angry. Baptists have been right and correct in being angry at abusers in our midst. Those that abuse, groom, and abuse children, and groom and abuse females, and even, younger males. We should be angry at that, but we should be angry without sin. Mm-hmm. We should take care of the situation. And there is a right way to take care of it. I don't know that we have been point on in that capacity. That's bothered me greatly over the last several years because I just did not feel like we were handling it in the right way. And I still don't think we've gotten there yet. But anyway.
Well, it's a good point of prayer just for the whole convention and churches in general, and just praying for this church, doing absolutely, and I mean everything that we can to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't come around here. Yeah. Really doing everything we can. Well, I guess as we wrap up, you already told us where you're going this week.
Yeah, I'll pick up in 29 and probably go through 32, I guess, most likely.
All right. Thanks for your clarity there as I plan the service.
We'll talk. I'll know more tomorrow
I know,
when you
just
hold
giving
court
you a word.
at your meeting.
Yes, hold court. He loves saying that. Hey, how's your post-Twitter lifestyle been? Are you feeling free?
Very, very good.
Free and clear?
I do. I've not missed it 1 minute. The only thing I miss off of Twitter is that you get news so fast.
Yeah, it is really, yeah.
You know, you can get. I heard about the. I don't know, something that happened in the news here that was pretty big. You know, look how quickly we get over news. Maybe it was the bombing of Israel's bombing of
Yeah, it goes so
Iran.
fast. People forget stuff.
And I heard it first on there. I heard it first on Twitter. Well, and that's the only part of it. I wish there was a news station or something like Twitter
That
where you
fast?
could get stuff quickly like that.
Yeah.
Because any of the other news channels that you get on an app, they don't put stuff on
not
that.
it's not the quick
They
breaking
want
news.
to verify everything before a lot of times
The
they
nerve
do.
of those
Sometimes they don't. But
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it.
I am.
And I'm almost off. I've got it off my phone. I'm probably going to follow your lead and get off here in the future. So we'll have continued updates for our social media journeys, along with a new sermon to talk about next Monday. Are you here next Monday? We're going to keep. Mm-hmm. Okay. So
you
we'll be
believe it?
back. We'll be back next Monday, and Lord willing, at that point there will be a freestanding Red Lobster cheese biscuits establishment somewhere. And if there is, you can rest assured that this podcast will be recorded live at that
Yeah,
establishment.
we will do a live from the place.
Yeah.
We ought to do that at Krispy Kreme.
That's a great idea.
To go live from Krispy Kreme.
Maybe we could get a sponsorship. Jared, why have you not done this
We're
yet?
doing it next week.
Okay.
Next
Live.
Monday.
So
From
we might
Krispy
see you
Kreme.
from Krispy. At the very least, there's going to be a backdrop back here of Red Lobster and/or Krispy Kreme. Jared's going to make that happen for us. Appreciate you guys. Say goodbye, Pastor.
Goodbye, Pastor. Oh, the famous kick.